أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear viewers, to the show Think About It. Today, I'd like to start off by thanking Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his office for getting back to me and for obviously encouraging us about the show and the content that we have. We do have a very special guest with us here today, a gentleman who agreed to be on the show. Member of Parliament Adam von Koeverden, whose constituency is Milton. Adam, thank you very much for being on the show today.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, Adam, I think of something that I'm sure a lot of people know about, but just to recap, you are in fact a gold medalist in kayaking. I mean, you're quite an athlete, and mashallah, good for you. I'd like to ask, from becoming an athlete who definitely represented Canada at a very high level and at the international level, what was the motivation or the thought, or let's just say the desire to come into becoming an MP and running for that?
Well, being a part of the Olympic team was a huge honor and privilege to represent my country. But I also had a lot of opportunities to give back to my community, whether it was working with various NGOs in an environmental capacity or humanitarian capacity. And when I look back on my sport career, when I retired after the Rio de Janeiro Olympics in 2016, I realized that I had a lot more to give. I still wanted to be a part of Team Canada. I still wanted to contribute to my community, and I still wanted to help out. And there's no better way, I guess there's no second better way than being part of Team Canada, than representing your community in Parliament.
That's actually quite great. And in fact, based on this, I have a question for you. Now, I myself am a permanent resident, and I have landed in Canada just recently. And a lot of people that I meet are still trying to figure out their way in Canada. They're trying to figure out the system. They're trying to integrate properly. And I guess one of the biggest questions that they have is that they have a desire and a need and a want to do something for their community. Where do they begin? Do you have any advice for those people?
Well, I have to say that the vast majority of the community members that I've gotten to know over the last couple of years in Milton, who are newcomers, as you stated that you are, and as my parents were when they first arrived in Canada. My mother came from Hungary and my father came from Holland as kids. They're always so willing and interested in giving back to the community. And Milton specifically has a really tremendous desire to contribute. And everybody in Milton, I think, follows that trend, especially lately with COVID-19. It's been a very difficult time for local businesses, for parents, for families, really for everybody. And Milton's come together. We had a very strong community effort called Milton Strong, a lot of hashtags on social media, a lot of messages going back and forth, supporting local businesses and supporting seniors and vulnerable people that couldn't get out and, do their grocery shopping early on. And I've been really, really amazed by the amount that the community has come together, the desire that everybody has to contribute. And, I think actually social media has done a lot for that. And, you just put the idea out there. Hey, does anybody want to help out with this idea? Actually, just the other day, a contractor in my riding in Milton, as you mentioned, Mario Chagas, put it on Facebook, said, hey, there's a gentleman with ALS, that's Lou Gehrig syndrome, that could really use a deck in the backyard with a ramp because he'd like to spend some time in the backyard with his kids. He's now confined to an electric wheelchair. And, that's an expensive prospect, particularly for this family during these times. So, he said anybody who's willing to contribute, just drop me a direct message. And within a few hours, he had $1,000 raised. And we were very proud to build this gentleman and his family a deck in the backyard. And that's just a small thing, but I've seen the Milton Halal Food Bank and Halton Food for Life providing food hampers for needier people or people who are using a food bank for the first time because they lost their job and perhaps the CERB payments aren't paying all of their bills. And so all that to say, I've been really, really amazed and impressed. And my heart is warmed by the degree to which my community and communities across Canada have come together to support each other during these difficult times.
That's definitely great. And I mean, just for everybody to rise up to the occasion and help one another out is always, no matter where you are, how it is, it's always an amazing feeling. And to be able to represent that community, I'm sure definitely does a lot for you as well. You mentioned the COVID-19 pandemic and how obviously businesses suffered. A lot of people were made redundant, even if it was temporarily. Just to go through it, I mean, thank God we're in phase 3 now, and we hope and we pray to God that everything normalizes soon and that we don't have a second wave at least. So the fight for COVID and the response of the government from, let's say, let's say early March when things started closing down up until now. I'd like to know what were the steps that the government took and how it plans on moving forward. Hopefully the COVID-19 subsides, or if there's a second wave coming, what can we expect? Are we prepared for it?
Well, like most Canadians, I'm really, really impressed with the degree to which the levels of Canadian government, so the provincial government, the federal government, various municipal governments and regional governments have come together to work together and support each other, fill the gaps, and ensure that people are taken care of during these difficult times. From a federal government perspective, the first thing that we did is we identified that EI just wasn't going to cut it, so we brought in CERB. That's the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit. I think at last count, it was over 8 million people took advantage of the CERB, and took advantage in a good way is what I mean. We also brought in the wage subsidy for those who were able to keep working. Perhaps the company wasn't bringing in the revenues that could support the employment. So the Canadian government stepped in with a very, very popular CEWS, Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy, which was topping companies up to 75% of their wages, which was extremely important in making sure that our economy stays afloat during these really difficult times. Lots of other programs, including KECRA, which was a program for commercial rents, as well as the bank account, a $40,000 loan for small and medium-sized businesses. For students, we brought in a $9 billion student emergency response benefit called the Canadian Emergency Student Benefit. So students were receiving $1,250 in addition to a top-up of $3,000 to their Canada student loans and Canada student grants. So ensuring that everybody from students to seniors are taken care of. Just recently, a lot of seniors would have received the second installment of their top-up. They received a top-up for their OAS, that's Old Age Security, Guaranteed Income Supplement, and of course those who are on CPP disability just received a $600 support as well. So we really tried to support everybody, businesses, families, seniors, and just everybody that was having difficulty. From a health perspective, we just brought in the app, the Health COVID Canada app. So I'd encourage everybody watching who can. It's a free app to download. All it does is basically notify you if you've been in contact with somebody who's self-identified as being diagnosed with COVID-19. But we've also invested in procurement across the country for personal protective equipment, for masks and gloves for frontline workers and healthcare workers. We've doubled down on ensuring that there's going to be a vaccination as soon as possible by investing in research and innovation. We've encouraged companies to retool to, maybe start producing ventilators rather than the other components that they were producing. And that's, there's been evidence of that across the country. And I think, it's a tough time for everybody in Canada, but I think we're doing pretty well. The numbers are staying pretty low. And like you said, most of Canada is into phase 3 now, which is heartening and promising. But we really can't take our foot off the gas. We must remain diligent, keep that physical distance, wear masks when we're out in public or when we can't maintain that physical distance. If you're riding public transit, if you're going shopping, if you're in the grocery store or something like that. Certainly if you're visiting the mosque or if you're going to a church, then please remain physically distant. I know that we're the Pakistani and the greater Muslim community was just celebrating Eid, so I wanted to say an Eid al-Adha Mubarak to my friends and neighbors in Milton, and I certainly hope that also everybody stayed socially distant and maybe an elbow bump rather than the hugs and high fives and handshakes.
Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure people will find ways to celebrate and definitely ways to greet each other with that with the greeting. But that's definitely good advice. Mentioned the financial aid that people received during the pandemic, and I have to tell you something. Living in Milton myself, my neighbor, I was speaking to my neighbor a few days ago, and that gentleman also a permanent resident ago. And the amount of respect that's born within the Canadian community, I mean, when it comes down to immigrants and people who in other countries not necessarily have the same privileges or the advantages or the system itself. Not only are they humbled by what's happening, but the amount of gratefulness that you could see within them and them wanting to do something more for the community just keeps rising. So I actually have a neighbor, if he's watching this, Mr. Amir, this is for you. He basically told me that he wants to find a platform where he could go and thank government officials face to face somehow, obviously with a social distancing aspect in mind. But he wanted to thank everybody in office for the great response, the support, especially the financial support. And definitely what you've mentioned about the precautions that we should still be taking, even though we're in phase 3, and it's definitely a heartening situation to see, is that hopefully a second wave doesn't come through and we all get together on our feet. Before that, you mentioned about frontliners. You mentioned how hard they've been working. So here's a question. Can we expect a Frontliners Day in the future calendar where we can celebrate all the, of course, the discipline that they brought forward, the sacrifices that they did, the determination that they had, and they stood up to the forefront and they made Canada, not only sustain itself, but made it safe as well, with no
Well,
regard of their own health.
the next civic holiday, just after this past weekend, the civic holiday, and actually it's called Simcoe Day in our region, if you were unaware. The first weekend in August. The next one is Labor Day, and it's a great opportunity to thank. And that's actually what Labor Day is all about: is thanking workers.
Definitely.
So, maybe this year and for years to come, Labor Day becomes frontline Labor Day. That's fine. I think you can celebrate any form of labor that you'd like, and certainly frontline workers, healthcare workers, are very deserving of our gratitude this year. With respect to Mr. Amr's gratitude to the government, no thanks are necessary. This is our job. This is our elected obligation, responsibility to listen to people and take care of them in tough times and in good times. So thank you very much for the gratitude, but you don't need to thank us in public. There's lots of opportunities for you to give back to your community. There's lots of opportunities to volunteer and to support people who are in need. So, I'd encourage you to direct your gratitude in that direction. But I got involved in public service to serve, not to be in charge, not to wear a tie and to do interviews like this. Thankfully, I avoid
do you want
wearing
me
a
to
tie
take off
anytime.
my tie? I don't mind.
No,
I don't
no,
mind taking it off.
keep wearing your tie.
This is, in fact, the first show that I'm wearing a tie on, by the way.
Well, the reason I got involved in public service was to help people out and to serve my community. So all that to say, Mr. Amr, you're more than welcome for the support, but we, everybody's contributing to the economy, and people pay taxes for a reason. And people pay taxes in Canada because we have a great government, and so that we can keep having a great government. It's not something that we can take for granted, but we're always going to work hard for people, and you can count on me for that.
Great. I'm sure Amr's listening to this, and he's definitely going to be taking back a few lessons from that as well. And he definitely does a lot for his own community too. He's in fact a small business owner, and he's doing a lot in Milton. So I'm pretty sure he'll be happy to hear that from you. I do have to move towards something that's a bit, it was new for me to learn, but when I came to Milton, I remember I was setting up my internet, and I had a company come over, and they brought the technician over, and his name was Mike, and I got to talk to Mike for about a good 3 or 4 hours because we kind of hit it off. We started talking about Canada and not being born here, and I came here as a federal skilled worker. I had some skill with me, and I thought that Canada would definitely be a great place for my kids to grow up. It would be a great place for the scope of whatever I'm able to do and the profession that I could provide as well. And I'm into humanitarian service and work as well, so I try to do volunteer work whenever I can. And so I met Mike, and Mike was telling me about how Canada used to be about 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And he said the neighbors would not only know each other, but if you'd see somebody coming out of their car and they had a bag of groceries with them, you feel the need to go up and take those groceries from the people, to help them out to their door or even to the kitchen. And people knew each other's names. They knew how things were. They take care of each other as well. It was, the community itself was a family. And what Mike kind of told me was that you probably didn't see that much when you came to Canada. And it's quite true that I've noticed that I don't know all my neighbors. And I've noticed that even from afar, when I try to, wave at somebody and say hi to them, they'd say hi to you, but that's probably the most that they do. Obviously, granted, you have to give everybody the allowance that you're busy. You've got your routines going through. Everybody's worried about work and everything. But in terms of community, I think the one biggest thing that I learned from Mike and a few other people that I met over here was that people aren't socializing as much as they used to in the past. And in terms of socializing, I mean, they don't have those strong bonds that they did before. So I was talking to Mike, and we came up with a few solutions, and we said that maybe if we do this, it'd be pretty good. Like have a potluck in the middle of the street, give it a day, have people come on over. You could close the street down, of course, with the city's permission, and everybody can get to know each other. But what can we do? I mean, if concerns like these do exist, then what can we
kind of strengthen the bonds between communities, neighborhoods to streets?
Well, these days it is tough to get to know people. If you're new in a community, I can't imagine how difficult it is to get to know your neighbors. I spent over a year knocking on doors in Milton and getting to know my neighbors, just to basically ask them what they wanted in a member of parliament. And I can't imagine knocking on strangers' doors now and shaking hands and stepping inside for a glass of water or a tea. And that happened dozens of times over the course of the previous year. But times are changing, so it definitely is a harder prospect now to get to know people. And I don't have a solution. Right now it's just it's time to sort of buckle down and to support each other.
Mm-hmm.
When you do see a new neighbor, wave and say hello. A lot of people are nostalgic for a time, before this one. But I'll say something.
Right.
I've never known my hometown to be friendlier than it is now, or more willing to give back. I've never seen a greater desire to contribute, and I've never seen people like rush to an opportunity to support each other.
Right.
Every opportunity that there has been to support the community, whether it was something simple by tying that blue ribbon to your tree or to your doorknob for frontline workers, or to step up and support local businesses, or to deliver groceries to seniors. I've seen Miltonians and people across Canada come together to support each other. So, I'm a forward-looking person. What are we doing next? How are we contributing into the future? How are we building back better? How are we, contributing to a green recovery? How are we creating progress in our communities? So I'm always going to be optimistic about the future. I'm not one for nostalgia. But I would say that I think that we're doing pretty well in Halton and in Milton specifically. We're making progress, and I've never known a community to be more generous and giving than ours in Milton.
What do you think about my solution, though? Like one of the proposals that I put forward, having a potluck barbecue for the whole neighbors to come around to. Can we make something like that happen?
There are, there's lots. Actually, there was one just this past weekend for Emancipation Day at the newly minted Milton Food Truck Plaza, which is on Mary Street. So there's always something to celebrate. We've got a great opportunity to come together in a safe way to support local farmers and small businesses and producers at the Milton Farmers Market every Saturday. So sometimes, finding that local institution to support, whether it's the local Legion or the Farmers Market or the food truck plaza, is simpler than reinventing the wheel. But there are lots of opportunities to have a local barbecue or something like that. I was planning on having a barbecue for Canada Day, but it was a difficult time to be giving away free food. And certainly we are, we are in a time when it's difficult to be social. But that said, finding those existing opportunities, whether it's on Saturday morning at the farmers market, Thursday afternoons, if you're looking to volunteer, Milton Bible Church has a great food bank over on Chisholm, just north on Martin, and they're looking for volunteers occasionally. You can look them up online. I know Milton Halal Food Bank.
I'm in line. I'll stand in line for that.
Yeah, so there's lots of ways to give back. I know that we have there's another blood drive coming to Milton in late August, and they're always looking for people to come and donate blood. So, I think there's plenty of ways to give back, and Milton is exceedingly generous with their time.
And another point that I want to bring up now is that another concern that some people might have is about home ownership. So, like, for example, when I came to Milton, I've got family in Milton that have been living in Milton for a few years now. I mean, my sister was living in Milton, and so was my wife's sister living in Milton. And when I came, I fell in love with the town. I mean, just the infrastructure of the town itself, the ability to drive around. I take my son down to where the fire trucks are and everything. And I see myself as somebody who might be living in that constituency for as long as I can. But at times, what has to be kind of looked at is as well that I can't really go off the face of the bat and just buy a house or get a house, and sometimes the prices are going up too. I mean, last week I was on a real estate website trying to find out if I could, actually get into a house, start my mortgage, start something, and the prices had jumped up even more. So looking forward, what do we have in line for those people definitely who love the constituency that they live in? It could be any. I mean, they could be down in Brampton, they could be Mississauga, they could be Milton, they could be all the way in Kitchener and Windsor. But what kind of program do we have in mind to help Canadians, permanent residents, people who want to live in this country, they want to give to this country, they want to stay in a place. Now, because of the fact that one place might be expensive, they might be forced to move to another constituency. So what can we do to kind of accommodate them? Something in the future that we might have in store for like better home ownership, helping people out, supporting them?
Slightly more difficult for some people, and home prices have certainly ballooned and grown faster than wages have in Canada over the last 25 years. So I'm very cognizant of that. Our government has brought in something called the First Time Home Buyers Incentive Program. So that's an opportunity to access some funding, and we're actually part of the envelope in Milton for the GTA. So we have an increased subsidy program through CMHC. So you can simply Google the federal first-time homebuyers incentive program. It comes with you can access some of your RSP if you're fortunate enough to have some money in your RSP. And CMHC will basically buy, I think it's up to 10% of your house if it's your first time. But there's also the first-time home buyers have always gotten that tax-free. So if it's your first home, then there's less taxes to pay. I don't think you pay HST on your first home. Don't quote me on that one, but I know how difficult it is.
I will be knocking on your door, though. I will be knocking on your door, though. But yeah, I won't coach you on it.
Certainly. Yeah. Well, we recognize how expensive it is to buy a house in Canada. One of my biggest sort of initiatives that I would like to contribute to is to work with Minister Ahmed Hussein of Social Development, Families and Infrastructure, or not infrastructure, sorry, Social Development, Families and Housing, and his Parliamentary Secretary Adam Vaughan to work on the National Housing Strategy, because it's something that I'm very passionate about. My mother's always worked in community housing. I grew up in community housing personally, and I'm very, very alive to the reality that housing insecurity in Canada is a real thing. For the middle class, buying a home is a tough prospect. But there's a category of the socioeconomic stratosphere that's housing insecure, so they can't even afford to pay rent in a single bedroom apartment for a small family. So I think there's a lot of problems with regards to home ownership. It doesn't start or stop with owning a home in a nice neighborhood in Milton. But I'm trying to find solutions so that everybody has a safe and secure place to live. Because that would get us a lot closer to that goal of 0% poverty and 0% housing insecurity in Canada.
So we'd definitely like to know more about that. Of course, soon later on when you've worked out the details and the plans, I'd love to have you again on the show to tell us all about that strategy. It sounds amazing. And I think a lot of people would definitely be uplifted by it, especially those people who come over here and they've got their life savings with them and they find out that, oh, my life savings aren't enough. So that's something that kind of hits them as well. But definitely a step in the right direction, no doubt, to bring us down to 0% poverty and 0%, hunger line, and people won't be able to pay their rent. With that said in mind, there are a lot of people who see Canada definitely as a country that prides itself in its diversity. And I do believe that, equality, diversity, and inclusion is the way to go forward, and it's something that's indoctrinated within Canadian values, and it's quite amazing. For those people who are applying and they're trying to come over to Canada through the express entry stream, I came through the express entry stream myself. I know a lot of other people, some of my own friends, some relatives as well, were trying to come over. And due to the COVID-19 pandemic, obviously, it halted the process itself because it wasn't safe to travel at the time. Flights had closed down. And the pandemic itself, you don't know if you're sick or not, and the whole quarantine situation. But I'm guessing with the situation clearing up now, and as we said, we're in phase 3 now, most of Canada is at least. When can we see those people who kind of put everything that they're riding on? Because there are a lot of people who are, whether they're in a country that's that they're national of, or whether it's a country that they're working in. Like I myself, I came from the Middle East, but I'm originally from Pakistan. So there are a lot of people who are working around, and in some areas where they're living right now, it's actually become difficult for them to live.
Their contracts have expired, or they're not being renewed, or they're facing some serious issues, and they have everything riding on the express entry, and right now it's halted. So, I get a lot of questions from my friends asking me that, do you know any updates? What's happening? And I'm like, I go on Google and I try going on the Canadian government website and try finding out what's happening, but I have just as much information as you do. So do you have any insight on when express entry, the IRCC, will continue or resume its applications for other people? I understand that right now we're looking at our citizens who are abroad, family members and relatives trying to come in, making it easy. That makes sense. But when can those people expect to be entertained or catered to in the near future?
Well, as you identified, Salman, this is a pandemic situation, so we are focusing our efforts on finding solutions for people's health and wellness during this time. So it's not an easy time for people who are hoping to immigrate. I don't have a date for you, and your question was quite long and touched a lot of different topics. And I suggest that if people are out there with questions specific to their own case, they should get in touch with their member of parliament. It's a simple process to send an email to their member of parliament. A website typically doesn't provide as much insight or perspective as somebody in the office. You may not talk directly to your MP, and quite frankly, my caseworker knows more about the IRCC than I do, so he's far more qualified to discuss the inner workings of the system. But our hope is that we can get back to whatever normal is in 2020, 2021 sometime soon, and we can get back to having the best immigration system in the entire world. And that's unequivocal.
Hopefully.
Canada's immigration system is world leading. It's the gold standard. It's how my parents arrived here, and it's how you've told me you've arrived here, and a lot of your friends have arrived here as well. So sometimes it takes time, and it's hard to tell people on the phone right now that patience is the key to their success. But right now, it's an extremely difficult time for the Canadian Public Service, and governments need to set priorities. And right now, with the borders closed between Canada and most other countries, it's not a time to be, talking about immigration.
No, I actually understand what you're saying, and even those words, patience being key, coming from you, I think a lot of people would still digest it better than me saying patience is a virtue. So I think that's good on you to say, and definitely we should take care of in-house situations right now prior to moving forward. But hopefully things do normalize, and as you said, that we have something that's it's a golden A standard immigration system that we have. I mean, I personally enjoyed the immigration system when I was applying. It was more like an adventure that you were going through, and with each and every letter, bit of correspondence that I was receiving, it was quite decent. And when I landed over here, it felt like as though I'd been here for a long time. So it's definitely quite amazing. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to go a little bit behind on your athletic side. So when it comes down to, let's say, sports and leisure time activities, just so everybody knows, I mean, we're part of the GTA. I personally am a cricket fanatic. I'm not sure if you're very familiar with cricket, but I'm sure you've heard of it. I know that you are a kayaking gold medalist. So I've never done kayaking before in my life, but what would be a good place for somebody who wants to get into sports, like when you have to join a club or you have to start off and you want to kind of make your way through so you can get to that level where you could represent Canada? Where would you say a person should start? I mean, let's say that somebody is playing their game, they're playing on the weekends, they're a part of a club. How do they get to that position where they can actually end up representing their city, to their town, to their province, to their country?
Well, it's actually the same way that you get, to Carnegie Hall. If you've ever heard that old riddle, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? It's practice. If you want to become a doctor, if you want to become a concert pianist, if you want to become, in many cases, a high school graduate or an Olympic gold medalist, whatever your goal is, it's going to take practice and hard work. So there's no easy way around it. There's no, magic solution to success. There's no shortcuts. And I always tell people, you don't look for the shortcut, look for the long cut. Look for the way where you're going to learn more.
But sometimes people are just...
You're going to be challenged, and you're going to have more of an opportunity to grow.
But sometimes you find people who are a bit clueless as well. So they'd be really good at something, and they'd be playing it at like a club at the Milton Sports Center. I remember quite a few of my friends playing hockey over there. They're ready to do it, but they don't really know the pathway of how to get there. They're willing to do the time, but they don't know where to invest it. So I guess that's one position to look at as well, which is quite interesting. Now, here's my question to you. Hopefully you stay to be the MP for a long time. And a lot of people have enjoyed the work that you've done, and you've definitely done a lot for your constituency itself. And so we're proud to call you our MP as well. What are your plans for the upcoming year and then the year after that?
Well, to be very honest, it's not an MP's job to prognosticate and to plan for the future. My job is to support my community. So I was on the phone today with a young woman who's part of an environmental alliance. She wants to see change in her community, in our community. So we were brainstorming some ways where she could, be an envoy between my office and and Sustainable Milton, and supporting people in their goals and their endeavors to create positive change, to make progress happen, and to make Milton a better place and to make Canada a stronger country. That's my job. So I will continually be an ear for Milton, but also a voice for Milton in Ottawa. When I stand up in the House of Commons in Parliament in Ottawa, I'm not speaking with my own voice. My objective is always to speak with the collective voice of my constituents in Milton. I'll always speak for equality, for diversity, for inclusion, and for progress and looking forward and finding solutions for people's problems, for finding, connectors between people's dots, and ensuring that nobody's feeling left out or falling through the cracks, because the government is supposed to work for everybody. And I think a good government ensures that nobody's falling through the cracks and that the most vulnerable are well taken care of. And that COVID-19 has really highlighted a need to ensure that, people who are living in long-term care, people who are vulnerable for other reasons, we've seen a real spike in deaths related to addiction. These are tragedies that are very preventable in Canada, and I think with solid, progressive, compassionate legislation, we can move forward and find solutions to people's problems. And I'll always be working on a ground level, at a grassroots level, here in Milton, to ensure that people's voices are heard in Ottawa.
In fact, that was basically part of my question in the different things that you support, and you mentioned that example. So it's actually really good to see. Now, I want to wrap things up. So before we leave, you mentioned the health application as well that people can use. I was actually
unaware of this. So I'd like you to give off some advice to those viewers that we have about the way forward.
So go to the App Store, whether you're using an Android or an Apple device on your cell phone. Just go to the App Store and type in Health Canada COVID or COVID-19 Canada. Search for the app. It's very, very obvious. It'll come up first. The app is all about privacy, ensuring that your privacy is maintained. It's very, very secure. I downloaded mine. It works in the background, and basically it doesn't know your location, but it speaks through Bluetooth with other devices around. And if somebody in your vicinity has been diagnosed with COVID-19, then you'll be notified that you were in the vicinity. So other countries have used similar device notification apps. But ours is world leading, and we hope it's going to make a big difference for people. It's, a sort of an update on contact tracing. And I think, going forward, it'll be a very, very important tool. But really, we've got to have a Swiss Army knife, not just one tool, not just a medical test, not just economic supports. The government really has to be a Swiss Army knife and ensure that we're doing everything to protect Canadians, to be innovative, to find that vaccine and find a solution for Canadians, and support people who are unfortunately ill or infected so that they recover.
Well, thank you very much, Adam von Koeverden, for being on the show today. Your words are definitely much appreciated at this time. And
thanks very much.
It was nice to finally see you as well. I mean, we had a few email correspondences with your office. It was great to see you and talk to you as well. And
absolutely.
So well done
nice to you. You too.
Great, thank you, sir. So hopefully we'll love to see you again on the show sometime with further developments. And thank you very much, sir. And for our viewers over there, keep thinking about it, ladies and gentlemen. You've got a lot that you've just gone from Adam von Koeverden.
We'll continue to move forward, and we'll continue to beat this COVID-19 situation. Hopefully a second wave doesn't come up, but definitely the government's working very well and quite rigorously to make sure that Canadians are safe, Canadian lives are secure, and that in the future, as Adam talked about home ownership as well, he talked about what they're working forward to and different projects and strategies that are coming up. So keep thinking about it, support the government, do whatever you can in your capacity, because then your capacity to do things is definitely going to increase. Thank you very much for tuning in. Think about it. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.